The mine was never silent. Even when the drills ground to a halt and the shift ended, the mountain carried on its own private conversation. Metal beams ticked and groaned, stone cracked in the dark, and deep below the shafts, the earth made noises too low to name. Sometimes, when I lingered at the edges of the tunnels with my notebook in hand, it felt less like natural settling and more like listening to something buried, something restless. That morning, I was cataloging samples in the survey tent when suddenly the radio hissed to life. "Eleanor," Harry's voice, deep, steady, but not steady enough. "Get down here, now." I didn't ask questions. When the foreman used that tone, you moved. The main shaft was already alive with the buzz of headlamps and boots when I arrived. The drill bit lay ruined at the mouth of the wall, its metal teeth bent and blackened, as though it had chewed through iron. But what drew every eye wasn't the wreckage. It was the void yawning just behind it. A hole, not wide, not yet, but big enough to exhale a steady draft of air that smelled damp, vegetal, and kind of sour. It clung to my skin, heavier than the usual dry dust of tunnels, like stepping into a greenhouse that had been locked shut for years. "Hell of a thing," Harris muttered beside me. He stood with his hands hooked on his belt, stocky and broad, his beard white with dust. He never flinched, not when a support beam snapped, not when half a tunnel collapsed 2 months ago. But his eyes wouldn't quite meet the dark. Dale, predictably, was grinning ear to ear, barely older than 20, always with a joke ready to cover his nerves. "Looks like a shortcut to the center of the earth," he said, tapping the stone rim with his pick. The sound went down and came back wrong, flattened and hollow, like it had passed through a throat. Dale's smile faltered for a bit, but he quickly forced it back. Reyes hung back from the group, arms crossed, his silver medallion glinting as his thumb rolled over it again and again. He murmured something in Spanish, quick and sharp, almost like he didn't want anyone to hear. A prayer, no doubt. He had worked too many jobs in unstable ground to trust holes that appeared where they weren't supposed to. Marta said nothing at first. Our medic, quiet and sharp-eyed. She rarely wasted words. She only lifted her flashlight and aimed it into the opening. "That isn't a cave," she said finally. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "It feels carved." Her light barely touched the inside before the dark swallowed it, but what little it revealed didn't sit right with me. The rock wasn't jagged like a fresh breach. It was smooth, curving inward as though water had flowed through for centuries. But no water courses ran here. No fissures either. At least, none that belonged to this geology. I crouched at the edge, ignoring Harris's grunt of warning. The air was warmer, closer to the void, sticking in my lungs. My headlamp beam, stretched 5, maybe 6 feet, before it drowned in black. Then, beneath the hiss of dust settling, I heard it. A scrape. Slow, deliberate, stone against stone, like something shifting far below. My throat tightened. I pushed back to my feet, brushing grit from my gloves. We need to test the air quality before we do anything else. Stabilize the entry, set anchors. There could be toxic gases in there. Harris nodded, but distractedly. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the hole like he expected it to move. Or we could just go in, Dale piped up. He swung his pick onto his shoulder and looked around for approval he didn't get. I mean, what are we waiting for? You see how big that opening is? There could be anything in there. New mineral deposits, hell, maybe a whole new chamber. The company will pay double if we... Shut your mouth, Reyes snapped. His voice was low, but it cut through the tunnel. You don't rush blind into places that breathe at you. Marta lowered her light, but didn't move her gaze. He's right. That air, it's too alive. The crew muttered uneasily, shifting on their boots. I knew what was going through their minds. This wasn't the first time we had stumbled onto a hollow, but this one was different. Too deep, too polished, too wrong. And yet, even as fear prickled across the group, I saw the hunger in Harris's eyes. A discovery like this could put a foreman's name in reports, maybe even textbooks. And for a geologist like me, it was even worse. Part of me wanted to go in, wanted to see what had carved those walls, what lived inside of that strange humidity. After a long while, Harris cleared his throat, voice firming. We will anchor a line. Quick look, nothing fancy. A murmur rolled through the men, half relieved to have orders, half terrified by them. Reyes just shook his head, but he didn't argue further. He started unpacking his gear. Dale's grin returned, brighter now, though the sweat shining at his temple betrayed him. And Marta's face tightened like she had already seen the ending. I found myself moving automatically, snapping carabiners, checking the strength of ropes. My hands knew the motions, but my thoughts kept circling back to the sound I had heard in the dark. That slow scrape, as though something inside the mountain had shifted its weight. The hole loomed wider with every glance, the draft breathing steadily against our faces. It wasn't a cave. Marta had been right. This was something older, stranger, something that had been waiting. And we were about to step straight into it. The line of rope dropped into blackness. Harris went first, his boots scraping against the rock as he tested the anchor. Heavy frame steady on the rope. Dale insisted on following, too eager to hide his nerves, and Marta sighed, but clipped in third, her face pinched with quiet dread. Reyes muttered under his breath as he checked the knots one last time before taking his place. And I brought up the rear, my notebook strapped tight against my chest, headlamp cutting a narrow cone into the dark below. The shaft swallowed us whole. The air grew wetter with every foot, clinging to my throat until breathing felt like swallowing steam. The walls around us weren't jagged mine rock. They curved smooth, sometimes even rippled. It looked almost organic. I forced myself to catalog it, to focus on the details. Calcite veins, strange mineral deposits, traces of lichen glowing faintly blue in the beam of my lamp. But beneath the science, something pressed in. The feeling that these walls weren't just formed, they had been shaped. No one spoke for the first 100 feet, only the sound of rope sliding through harnesses, of boots thumping rock, of our breaths echoing too loud in the hollow. Then Dale left, too loud, too forced. "Feels like we're climbing down a throat," he said. His voice bounced down the shaft, warped on the way back. "Shut it," Harris barked, but I saw his shoulders tense. It felt longer than it should have, the descent stretching time thin. My muscles ached by the time my boots hit the floor, sinking into a damp, spongy layer of moss that squelched beneath my weight. I swung my lamp in a wide arc. The cavern opened vast before us, the ceiling lost in shadow. There were pillars of stone, rising like the trunks of ancient trees. Pools of water gleamed between the rocks, their surfaces broken by pale roots, or something that looked like roots. Martha's voice was quiet. This is a whole world down here." And she wasn't wrong. The air smelled of wet earth and rot, but beneath that was the unmistakable tang of living green. Patches of fungus clung to the walls, glowing faintly in the dark. There were fern-like plants, sprawled in damp corners. Insects scuttled away from our light, clicking as they vanished into cracks. This place wasn't just a cave. It was an ecosystem. Reyes crouched near one of the pools, dipping his fingers in the water, then quickly pulling them back. "Warm," he muttered. "Too warm." He rubbed his hand against his pants, as though trying to rid himself of the touch. His medallion caught the light, his thumb grinding it nervously. Dale had already wandered ahead, boots splashing through shadow puddles, headlamp jerking over rocks. "Look at this, it's prehistoric, like we are the first people on the planet." "Stay close," Harris snapped. "Nobody moves out of sight." His voice was hard, but it didn't carry the same authority it usually did. In a place like this, the mountain had the authority. I just pulled out my notebook, forcing my hands to steady as I scribbled observations. bioluminescence, humidity above normal mine levels, potential volcanic venting. But my pen hesitated when I tried to describe the sound, the constant undercurrent that filled the cavern. It wasn't water, and it wasn't wind either. It felt like a low, intermittent scraping, as though stone rubbed against stone in the distance. We followed a natural path deeper, our headlamps sweeping over formations that looked almost like nests, shallow bowls carved into the rock, lined with something fibrous. I leaned closer to one, brushing my light across it. The fibers weren't roots. They were bones, small, brittle, hollow like those of birds. Jesus, I whispered. Marta was at my shoulder, her breath hitched. This place isn't empty. Harris grunted, signaling us onward, but I saw the way his eyes kept darting upward, into the dark above us. Something about the ceiling bothered him, and it bothered me too. The way shadows seemed to shift just beyond reach. The way every now and then dust trickled down, as if disturbed. We reached a clearing where the cavern widened, a circle of stone surrounded by pools that shimmered faintly. The air was thicker here, almost oppressive, buzzing faintly in my ears. Dale spun in a slow circle, his laugh echoing again, though this time it cracked halfway through. "You hear that?" he said, head cocked. No one answered, because we all heard it. Not scraping this time, and it wasn't distant. It was a click, sharp, deliberate, from the dark ahead. Then another and another, echoing around us, until the cavern seemed alive with it. It sounded like teeth tapping together, like claws testing stone. I tightened my grip on the notebook, though writing was impossible now. My lamp quivered as I swept it over the rocks, trying to catch the source. The click stopped instantly, leaving the cavern drowned in silence, so heavy I could feel it in my chest. Reyes whispered the words we were all thinking. No estamos solos. We are not alone. Harris raised his hand, signaling everyone to stay still. His jaw was clenched, sweat shining on his temple. Martha's breath quickened, and Dale's grin had died completely. I forced myself to write one last note, the pen scratching unevenly across the damp paper. Signs of movement. Not human. The silence stretched too long. Every second without a sound pressed harder against my ears, until the rush of my own blood drowned out thought. Harris still held his hand up, though It trembled now. The click-clack had stopped, as if it had never happened. Yet the cavern felt crowded, as though the dark itself was listening. Then, slowly, almost defiantly, Dale cleared his throat. Could be rocks falling, he whispered. His voice cracked. Rocks don't echo like that, Martha said. Harris gestured forward, and against every instinct, we obeyed. My boots squelched in the damp moss as we edged deeper into the cavern. Our lights picked out details that I wished they hadn't. More of those bowl-shaped hollows, lined with brittle bones. A set of claw marks carved high into the stone. Far too high for any man to reach. And shadows that seemed thicker than the rock allowed. Shapes that melted back into the dark the second we turned our lamps their way. We came to a tunnel narrowing of the main chamber, a gash in the rock that seemed to breathe its own rhythm. Harris crouched, sweeping his light over the floor. Tracks, he muttered. I leaned in beside him. The prints were three-toed, pressed deep into the damp moss, each one the length of my forearm. They were fresh. The edges glistened. My stomach turned to ice. Reyes backed away immediately, shaking his head. No, this is not right. He clutched his medallion tight in his fist. We should go, seal it, tell the company the cavern collapsed. You think they'll let us walk away from this? Harris growled, but his voice wavered. This is a discovery. Fossils, maybe something alive down here. We are not leaving empty-handed. Martha's gaze darted between the prints and the dark beyond. Alive isn't always a good thing. I opened my notebooks with numb fingers, scrawling as fast as I could. Three-toed tracks, fresh, weight distribution suggests predator. The words blurred, and my hand shook violently. That was when the smell hit. It drifted up from the tunnel, coppery, sharp and unmistakable. Blood, old blood, baked into the damp air until it clung to the back of my throat. I gagged and stabbed my headlamp beam into the passage, and for an instant, I wished I hadn't. Half buried in the moss, not even 10 feet away, was a helmet, the kind our miners wore, dented and rusted. But the lamp was still faintly glowing, its weak beam swallowed by the dark. And the helmet wasn't empty. Inside it was a skull, picked clean, resting on a spine that vanished into the earth. The others saw it too. Martha pressed a hand to her mouth. Dale muttered a curse and stumbled back. Fossils, huh? Reyes hissed. Tell me fossils leave that. Before Harris could answer, this sound came again, but It wasn't a click this time. It was a scrape. Long, slow, like claws dragging down stone. And this time, it came from above. We all lifted our lights at once. The ceiling stretched high, far beyond the reach of our beams. But for a heartbeat, I swore I saw movement. A pale blur against the black, sinewy and fast. The dust rained down in a thin curtain. Then it was gone. My chest tightened until it hurt. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but my legs refused. Harris finally found his voice, low and urgent. "Okay, stay close. Nobody splits off." We moved again, though slower now, our lights jittering across rocks and water. Every sound was magnified. The squelch of our boots, the rasp of breath, the creak of rope against carabiners. Every few steps, we heard something answer us. The scuttle of stone knocked loose in the distance. The whisper of water disturbed. The echo of claws striking surfaces unseen. And at one point, Dale stopped short. "There, look." We froze. At the edge of our lights, maybe 30 feet ahead, a shadow slipped across the rock. Thin, long-limbed, tail whipping behind it before vanishing around a curve. It was gone in a blink, but none of us doubted what we had seen. Reyes muttered a curse, clutching his medallion so hard it left his hand shaking. Martha reached for her medkit as if it could do any good. Dale whispered, "Did you see the size of that?" before Harris cut him off with a sharp look. We pressed on, but the path was no longer ours. It felt guided, as if the tunnels themselves were herding us, leading us deeper. The air grew hotter, thicker, until it weighed on my chest. And the glow of fungi brightened in patches, bathing the rock in eerie blue light. And in that glow, we saw more signs. Bones, not fossils, fresh. There were piles of them. Rib cages cracked open, skulls gouged with deep curved marks. There was a femur, longer than any animal I knew, sheared clean in half, as though by a blade. Martha whispered, "Predators don't leave this much waste, unless they are not hungry." I couldn't bring myself to write it down, but she was right. Whatever lived here didn't hunt for food alone. After a while, the clicking started again, soft at first, then layered. One ahead, another behind us, a third off to the side, encircling us. We stopped, light swinging widely into the dark, but nothing was visible, nothing except the clicks, echoing like a language we weren't meant to hear. And I realized then, with the kind of certainty that leaves no room for doubt, that we hadn't stumbled into an untouched ecosystem. We had walked into something's territory, and it already knew exactly where we were. The clicks grew louder. They bounced off the walls until I couldn't tell direction anymore, only that they were closing in. My lamp beam shook across wet stone, caught nothing but the suggestion of movement, a tail whipping past, or a claw vanishing behind a pillar. Harris finally lost patience. He raised his voice, a sharp growl against the echo. "Enough of this. We move. Now. Fast." We hurried forward, boots slapping wet moss, lights jerking erratically. The tunnel narrowed, forcing us into single file. Water dripped steadily from above, pattering on helmets, but beneath that rhythm came something heavier. The thud of claws, striking rock, following in time with our steps. Dale muttered behind me. "Too fast, too loud. They are tracking us, like wolves. You hear that? Like fucking wolves." "Shut it," Harris barked, though his own breath was ragged. The passage bent sharply, opening into a smaller chamber. We stumbled in, half relieved to have space again, but then we saw what filled the room. Bones. Not scattered, not random, arranged in spirals and circles. Rib cages curved together in grotesque patterns. Skulls stacked in cairns. It wasn't the mess of animals feeding. It was deliberate, ritualistic. Martha stopped dead, her hand clamped over her mouth. "Oh my God." Reyes hissed through his teeth. "This is a nesting ground." I wanted to write it down, to record, to document, but my hands wouldn't obey. My lamp swung wildly across the spiral of bones, and that's when I saw it. A shadow detached itself from the wall. It dropped soundlessly, crouched low, limbs coiled with alien grace. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over ribs and muscle, as though centuries underground had leached all color away. The head, long, narrow, jaws bristling with teeth. Its eyes were gone, sealed over with scar tissue. Blind eye sockets twisting. It tilted its head, opening its mouth, and it loosed a single sharp click. The sound hit my chest like a hammer. Echolocation. It wasn't blind at all. It saw us perfectly. "Back," Harris rasped. He raised his pick, knuckles wide. But before we could move, more shapes slid from the ceiling, from behind pillars, from holes in the floor we hadn't noticed. Dozens of them, pale and sleek, their tails whipping, their claws scraping deliberately against the stone. They were encircling us. Dale screamed, not a word, not even a plea, just a raw sound as one of them lunged. It hit him like a truck, knocked him flat, its jaws closing around his throat before he could breathe again. Blood sprayed across the moss, hot and metallic. His lamp flickered once and then went dark. Chaos exploded. Martha dragged me back as Harris charged forward with a roar, swinging his pick with desperate strength. The iron blade connected with a sickening crunch, and the thing shrieked, a piercing, high-pitched sound that rattled my teeth. But 2 more were already on him, claws tearing into his arms, dragging him down. His cries turned guttural, cut off in a wet gurgle. "Run!" Reyes shouted, voice breaking. He bolted for a side passage, light jerking madly as he vanished into the dark. And for a moment, I thought he might make it. But then a pale blur dropped from above, knocked him flat, and the light died in an instant. His scream echoed once, then nothing. Martha yanked at my harness, dragging me toward another tunnel. We stumbled, slipped on wet stone, slick with blood. And behind us came the sounds. Claws raking, teeth crunching, and the bones of my friends snapping. We ran blind. The air grew hotter, thicker, as if the cavern itself wanted to suffocate us. My legs burned, lungs tearing, notebook slamming against my chest with every stride. The clicks followed, bouncing closer and closer until they felt like they were inside my skull. We burst into another chamber. It was smaller, rounder, its walls slick with condensation. I swung my lamp and froze. Eggs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, clustered in mounds of damp moss and bone. Each one the size of a man's torso, shells pale and translucent. Inside, shadows shifted and twitched, half-formed limbs pressing against the thin barrier. Martha staggered back, whispering hoarsely, "No, no, 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 no." The clicks behind us intensified. They were rapid now, excited. The hunters had herded us here, driven us into the heart of their brood. The first of them appeared at the tunnel mouth, head low, jaws dripping. It clicked once, and the eggs nearest us shuddered in response. I clutched Martha's arm, but she shoved me hard toward the far wall. "Go, climb if you can." Her eyes were wide, fierce with terror. "Do not stop." No, my voice cracked, useless, already drowned by the growing cacophony. She pushed me again, harder, and then turned. She snatched a flare from her belt, struck it, and the chamber blazed with red light. For one heartbeat, the creatures hesitated, hissing against the sudden glow. Martha raised the flare high, screaming in defiance. And then they were on her. The red light whipped violently, swallowed by pale bodies, and her scream cut short in a wet final gasp. I just ran. I don't remember leaving the egg chamber. One moment, the flare was burning red in Martha's hand, her scream tearing through the cavern as these monsters closed over her like a tide. The next, I was staggering blind through tunnels, hands scraping raw against the slick walls, boots slamming against stone, my lungs clawed for air that wasn't there, every breath thick with the stench of rot and copper. The clicks followed, louder now, faster, ricocheting off the walls until direction had no meaning. Left, right, behind, ahead, it didn't matter. They were everywhere. I stumbled into another passage, narrower, claustrophobic even. My headlamp threw shaky light over the stone, catching shapes I couldn't process, gorges deep into the rock, shredded piles of fur and hide, gnawed bones that still glistened with marrow. My stomach lurched, bile burning in my throat, but I kept moving. If I stopped, I knew I would never start again. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper, until the air pressed like a weight against my chest. My light flickered once, twice, threatening to die. I slapped the casing with my palm, breath ragged, begging it to hold. For a moment, it steadied, and that was when I saw it. The cavern opened vast before me, a cathedral of stone, the ceiling disappearing into black. It was so high it felt infinite. The walls gleamed wet, streaked with phosphorescent fungi that bathed everything in a ghostly blue glow. And across the floor, stretching further than my light could reach, lay more eggs. Piles upon piles of them, some as tall as my waist, others cracked open, their shells split wide. And above them, I froze, body locking in place as my light drifted higher. They were there, dozens of them, hundreds, clinging to the walls, the ceiling, the pillars of stone. Pale bodies pressed flat against the rock, claws hooked in, tails coiled like ropes. Their blind heads tilted toward me in unison, sockets twitching, jaws opening and closing with soft, eager clicks. The sound rolled through the chamber like rain, like hail, a storm of teeth and bone. My knees buckled, the notebook slid from my chest, pages soaked in damp. My light flickered again. It was weaker now, throwing the cavern into stuttering motion. White skin shifting, claws flexing, eggs trembling in their nests. I backed away, heel catching on loose stone, and nearly fell. My hand smacked against the wall, and that tiny sound, skin against rock, was enough. The clicks erupted into frenzy. Every creature shifted, claws tearing at stone, bodies coiling. The eggs near my boots shuddered violently, cracks spiderwebbing across their shells, and inside them, shadows writhed and pushed, eager to join the hunt. No, the word tore from my throat, thin and useless. My lamp sputtered, dimmed to a ghost of itself, and for an instant, the world shrank to a trembling cone of light, just big enough to show me the closest of them, easing down the wall, mouth open, strings of saliva dripping from jagged teeth. And then the light died. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard them then, claws striking stone, tails whipping the air, bodies rushing toward me. The egg split, wet shells bursting, the ground alive with new hungry things. The last sound I knew before the dark consumed me completely was the storm of clicks. All around, above, beneath, the chorus of a world that had never stopped breathing, waiting, feeding. And then nothing.